The public discourse is fixated on missile silos and warheads. This is a calculated misdirection. The primary vector for systemic collapse is not a hypersonic launch. It is silence. The most credible threat from a cornered state is not a kinetic strike against a city, but a strategic disabling of the global nervous system. 99% of all intercontinental data, trillions in daily financial transactions, is transmitted through a small number of undersea cable clusters. A solvency crisis, as observed in Cuba with its worsening energy deficit, source number 1, or inside Iran's deepening crisis, source number 2, recalibrates strategic priorities. It shifts the calculus from conventional victory to asymmetric leverage. According to RUSI, severing a single choke point like the Strait of Malacca or the Red Sea corridor is the modern equivalent of a nuclear first strike, executed with a pair of cable cutters. The second vector is orbital. The Ukraine AI war demonstrates a total battlefield dependency on satellite architecture for data, targeting, and logistics, sourced in Earth 3. CSIS analysis confirms that low-cost, ground-based directed energy weapons can blind entire low-Earth orbit constellations, effectively paralyzing an adversary's C4ISR capabilities. You do not need to destroy a billion-dollar asset. You only need to deny its signal during a critical liquidity event. Combine these two vectors: a simultaneous data blackout from the ocean floor and signal denial from orbit. The result is not chaos. It is a precise engineered state. We call it the blind Leviathan, a global power structure instantaneously stripped of its sight and its capacity to transact. This protocol transforms the targeted state's asymmetric liability into the system's terminal solvency crisis. While officials engage in peace talks, source in R4, the blueprint for this action has already become a mathematical certainty for any nation facing economic extinction. The motive is never ideology. The motive is solvency. When a nation-state's balance sheet is systematically attacked through sanctions and financial warfare, its leadership faces a dual crisis. Externally, its access to global markets and liquidity evaporates. Internally, it faces a mounting domestic liability, the cost of maintaining social order and prosecuting what becomes, as CSIS analysis of the Russian Federation notes, a deeply unpopular and resource-draining kinetic operation. This is the solvency trap. Conventional victory becomes mathematically impossible. The strategic calculus is reset from winning to surviving. Weakness forces a pivot. The regime's only remaining asset is its ability to generate instability. It must transform itself from a conventional opponent into an asymmetric liability. This protocol is universal. We see it in the energy crisis vectoring into Cuba. Resource denial via U.S. intervention in Venezuela creates increasing pressure on the government, forcing a scramble for solvency. We see it in reports titled "Inside Iran's Deepening Crisis." The pressure is not designed to produce compliance. It is designed to break the conventional model and force a non-conventional response. The ultimate motive is to create leverage where none exists. By threatening systemic choke points, whether it's energy futures, as seen in the Ukraine AI war's effect on fuel demand, or the integrity of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the insolvent state forces the system back to the negotiating table. The threat of kinetic action is not an act of madness. It is the final, logical move in a zero-sum game of economic survival. The economics of lethality have been inverted. According to analyses from institutions like the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the kinetic cost-exchange ratio is now unsustainable for conventional powers. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 FPV drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 return on kinetic investment. We are witnessing the raw democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting systemic force has collapsed. For an asymmetric liability pushed into a solvency crisis, like Cuba facing an energy blockade or Iran under deep sanctions, this new math is not a strategic choice. It is the only leverage remaining. The ability to destroy high-value assets is now mathematically cheaper than the ability to defend them. This is the engine of escalation. The kinetic phase of the next war will not begin in a capital city. It will be triggered from a gray zone, a region of cultivated instability designed to serve as a launchpad. These are not failed states. They are weaponized states, functioning as proxy laboratories for asymmetric warfare. Examine Cuba. The deliberate severing of its Venezuelan oil lifeline, as documented following U.S. intervention, is not merely an act of foreign policy. It is the deliberate induction of a national solvency crisis. Source number 1 confirms Cuba's energy crisis is worsening, forcing a search for alternatives. This pressure does not create compliance. It creates desperation, the primary resource for an asymmetric liability. When a regime's balance sheet is broken, it ceases to operate on conventional logic. It shifts to a launch-on-warning footing. Per RUSI analysis, this is the blueprint perfected by Iran. The nation's deepening crisis, cited in source number 2, is the accelerant. The regime's leverage is not its military, but its ability to activate non-state actors in systemic choke points outside its borders. CSIS reports flag seemingly stable regions as the next vector for this protocol. Internal instability in logistical hubs, like the ports of South Africa, are not local problems. They are systemic vulnerabilities. An asymmetric liability can exploit these pre-existing fractures to impose a kinetic cost on global trade, creating deniable disruption far from its own territory. Ukraine is the final stage of this process, a gray zone that went fully kinetic. It serves as a live-fire testbed where, as source number 3 indicates, AI-driven warfare is testing the limits of fuel supply chains. This is the protocol's mathematical endpoint. A targeted state pushed past solvency, calculating that the kinetic cost of disrupting a systemic choke point is its only path to survival. The gray zone is not a symptom of instability. It is the deliberate staging ground for a calculated response. The strategy is to find the system's unguarded circuits, financial, logistical, or political, and prove that the cost of applying pressure is higher than the cost of negotiation. The peace talks mentioned in source number 4 are not a sign of de-escalation. They are the result of the kinetic cost becoming unbearable. The nuclear deterrent of a major power is not based on absorbing a first strike. It rests on a doctrine known as launch-on-warning. According to analysts at RUSI, this is not a policy of aggression. It is a protocol of solvency. The logic is absolute. If an adversary's missiles are detected in the air, you must launch your own before they impact. To wait is to have your retaliatory capability erased, rendering your entire nuclear arsenal a sunk cost. The system is automated to guarantee a second strike. This entire protocol, however, has a single point of failure. the data. The warning itself is derived from a network of satellites and ground-based radar. In the 21st century, that network is a digital construct. The new vector of attack is not a hypersonic missile. It is a malicious code injection. A sophisticated cyber attack can blind the system, or worse, make it lie. This is the fog of digital war, the deliberate introduction of systemic ambiguity into an adversary's decision loop. This forces an impossible dilemma upon the commander. The countdown clock does not stop for a system reboot. CSIS reports indicate the decision window is under 12 minutes. If the radar is blind, is it a technical glitch or a decapitation strike in progress? If the screen shows 5 incoming warheads, is it a real attack or a spoofed signal? The protocol is designed to default to action under uncertainty. The fear of being disarmed forces the commander's hand. He is compelled to launch based on compromised data. This is the ultimate asymmetric leverage. A nation-state facing a solvency crisis from economic pressure, such as the deepening crisis in Iran, cannot compete symmetrically. It does not need 1,000 ICBMs. It needs a single credible cyber weapon capable of triggering the adversary's own doomsday machine. Its leverage is no longer about winning a conflict. It is about threatening the stability of the entire system. The kinetic cost of a false alarm becomes its primary deterrent. The endpoint of sustained economic warfare is therefore a mathematical certainty. By breaking a regime's conventional options, you force it to target systemic choke points. The launch on warning protocol is the most critical choke point of all. The final play is not to launch a missile, but to create the credible threat that you have forced the superpower to launch its own. This is not a failure of the system. It is the designed feature of asymmetric economic warfare. The final stage of the protocol is now active. As a nation-state's conventional solvency is broken, its strategic calculus shifts from winning to survival. According to CSIS analysis, the deepening crisis in Iran and the systemic fuel shortages in Cuba, driven by external pressure, are not isolated distress signals. They are triggers. The state, now an asymmetric liability, has only one vector for leverage: to threaten the stability of the system that is liquidating it. The escalation is not kinetic, not yet. The first event is a test, a calibration shot designed to be attribution impossible, but with a signal so clear it cannot be misinterpreted by its intended audience. The objective is not destruction, but the demonstration of capability. It is a mathematical equation to measure system fragility and response time. The calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, expect a catastrophic, non-kinetic failure at a Tier 1 U.S. logistical choke point. The target will be the digital backplane of a major container port, like Long Beach or New York, crippling its loading and scheduling systems for 48-72 hours. It will be officially attributed to a cascading software update failure or aging infrastructure. The kinetic cost will be calculated in frozen liquidity. It will be a warning.